Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We continue our discussion of how the degeneration of psychology, which can take place with the idea of Islamic psychology and post-Islamic psychology, which we have elucidated in our book, Post-Islamic Psychology, a Transcendent Model to Achieve Peace, Happiness and Success in the 20th Century. But before we go into that, we have to look into how this so-called advanced civilization in the 20th century, starting with Freud, Sigmund Freud, he started this idea of personality theory, psychoanalytic, psychosexual theory of human psyche. And it is a very degenerative form of psyche, which is gross, which is evil. It's just based on desire. So if we look from the perspective of Islamic psyche of human nature and the nature of our thoughts, later on when we will go into cognitive behavior therapy and positive Islamic cognitive behavior therapy, we can see the big difference in terms of the worldview and philosophical idea of the nature of man, his psyche, the nature of existence, and his psychology, because psychology is the study of human nature. At what level? So if we look at this whole concept, the doctors of Islam, the scholars of Islam, over 1,000 years have explained the nature of man. Many of them explaining from the three levels as mentioned in the Quran, An-Nafsul Ammara Bisu, An-Nafsul Lawwamah, An-Nafsul Mutmainnah, and how coherence, personality coherence of, and also the fullness of life, where there is complete integration of man at the highest level and at the lower level. But in Islam, it is always not a conflict, but a progression, a lesson of our psyche in the development of our existence on this earth and in the life beyond. But when we look at the psychology of the 20th century, all right, for more than 60 years, until the late 50s, we still are using the psychoanalytical theory of human existence. And this whole idea is based on Freud's idea that we have the id, which needs immediate gratification. We have the ego and the superego, which then controls our existence, whether at the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the conscious mind. But the whole idea and the framework of Freudian theory is just based on desire. It is just first divorce God from the whole nature of human existence. When you ask this detail, what is the unconscious mind, what is the subconscious mind, what is the ego, what is the superego, what is the id, maybe he can explain it, but he explained it only from the gross idea of human sexuality. Rather than explain to you in 5 minutes video on YouTube, which you can get, and then you see his idea, then I'll explain to you in detail in the later part of this video, inshallah.
The psychoanalytic theory says that our childhood experiences and unconscious desires influence behavior. So this is a key word for this theory, unconscious. So our personalities have memories, beliefs, urges, drives, and instincts that we are not always aware of. And the major driving force and you may have heard of this, but we'll go over it. So libido is a natural energy source that fuels the mechanisms of the mind. And when this libido energy is stuck or fixated, various stages of psychosexual development, there's another key word. So when this fixation occurs at this psycho development and stages, conflicts is what predicts adult personality, according to this theory. For example, someone psychosexual development might have oral personality characteristics like overly having a smoking habit when they grow up. Freud breaks down those mental structures I was talking about into 3 parts, and we can look at this by looking at an iceberg. So let's break this down into 2 parts first. The top of the above the surface is the conscious part of our mind. So, and if that's the conscious, what do you think this bottom is? If you said unconscious, you are right. So it's the unconscious mind. Notice, the unconscious is a lot conscious. Of our mind is hidden below the surface of our, and that is the id. So the id is located, and it's the unconscious part of most of the mind. It's hidden below the surface, and it develops. Now, the second part of this structure is the ego. The ego is right here in this compartment. Okay, we'll see why that's the case in a little bit. But the ego is involved in our perceptions, thoughts, and judgments, and it seeks long-term gratification as opposed to the id's. And the third compartment, right over here, I'm going to try to fit it in, is the superego. Now, the superego develops around the age of 4, and it's our moral compass, or our conscience. Don't get that confused with conscious. Conscience, the little tongue twister. Okay, so let's go back to these psychosexual stages I was talking about. So our libidinal impulses, right here, are what want to be gratified. And when they are either over-gratified or not gratified at all or partially gratified, fixation occurs at a psychosexual stage, and we face either conflict or anxiety. Now, what I mean by conflict is not this whole battle or drama that plays out, but it's a conflict between these 3 mental structures of our mind, the ego, the superego, and the id, because all of them are competing for demands. So they're in a conflict. Think of it like this. I'm going to draw out ourselves right here. Like that. And there's the rest of us. You get the picture? Okay. Whoa, this person has really big arms, but you get the idea. Okay, so think of it like this. We have the id sitting on one shoulder, over here. And this is us looking. We're in a little bit of a conflict. Okay, so the id is sitting on one shoulder here, and it's really, really upset because it's demanding gratification and it isn't immediately getting it. Remember, I said it wants immediate gratification. But then over here, you have this superego. And the superego is sitting on its high horse, and it's teaching to the id about what's more. And then what about the ego? What happens to the ego? What role does that have? Well, it's going to be in the middle. Because the id wants gratification, and only gratification. And it's going back and forth with the superego. So the ego right over here is trying to gratify the id. But it also has to take into account what the superego is saying. The superego's moral oversight, which represents the values of society. Now remember I said earlier that the ego is part of the conscious and the unconscious minds. So it basically acts as a mediator between the unconscious desires of the id and the moral demands of the superego. So have you ever heard of a Freudian slip? That's actually an example of a mental conflict. So for example, a financially stressed patient tells his doctor, "Oh, doctor, please don't give me any bills." Well, what he really meant to say was, "Please don't give me any pills." So this whole process that I went through of the ego, the superego, and the id, becoming fixated in psychosexual development due to conflicts is all part of the psychoanalytic theory. And this process is part of personality development for all individuals, but it's especially problematic when there's a problem with gratification in a particular psychosexual stage.
Okay, we have heard this whole idea of how
in Malaysia,
how Sigmund Freud developed this whole idea of human personality based on nafsul haywaniyah and shahwaniyah. The doctors of Islam has explained this in detail because his whole theory of psychoanalytic and psychosocial development is based on a very gross idea of the conflict between the ego and the superego based on libido. The psychosexual development and gratification and fixation, as mentioned in the video, is based on one, oral stage. Second one is the anal stage. That one is the philic stage. Then is the latent stage. And then the latest stage is the genital stage. You can imagine the whole idea of human existence is just based on what? Sex. It's gross. It is unbelievable that in the 20th century, from the 1900s to 1950s, the whole human civilization answer to our existential question of the nature of our existence is just based on sex because of the idea of Sigmund Freud, psychosocial development and gratification. There's nothing more to it. So you can see that when he explains this whole idea, it is oral stage, anal stage, phallic stage, latent stage, and genital stage. And this whole idea is that there is always conflict between the ego and the superego based on desire. The key word is, so every desire that you wishes will then be developed into fixation at a various level of your existence as a human being, and this is gross. It is utterly unhuman or inhuman. It is just based on as the Muslim Islamic doctors 1,000 years ago have said, this whole idea is based on the nafsul haywaniyah and shahwaniyah. It's even worse than nafsu ammara bisu. And I'll explain to you the next level of how we can regenerate psychology based on Islamic psychology and post-Islamic psychology so that we can understand that this whole idea of fraudulent personality development is based on just speculation, based on gross human desire, which from the Islamic perspective is nafsul haywaniyah and shahwaniyah and nothing more than that. And how the other developmental psychological tools that we have, whether it's behavioral psychology, whether it is humanistic psychology, and how we can interface with the various psychotherapies, including, for example, the psychotherapy based on Freud, and also the modern psychotherapy based on CBT. Where does it stay on the continuum of our existence? From here to here to here, and what are the parameters that we are looking at so that we regenerate? Because this degenerated 21st century human psyche and human psychology is creating a fragmented humanity in this 21st century. Unless we regenerate ourselves, we will be just mere human being living in an aimless world of just hedonistic desire, fulfilling only our baser nature, and we'll never achieve peace, happiness, and success. And this whole idea is explained by Imam Ghazali 1,000 years ago. All right, I just read one aspect where the revival is in the book of Constructive Virtue, and Imam Ghazali explained this nature of how, from the perspective of Islamic, this whole idea is actually was already founded and discussed by Islamic scholars 1,000 years ago. Imagine, in the 1882, Freud come out with this idea. 1,000 years ago, Imam Ghazali says, what does he say about the different stages of human pleasure? A boy takes pleasure in play and sport, not in power, name and fame. So he's a boy, he's more of play stage. He's at the stage of play. All right. In the second stage, when he grown up to a young man, he takes pleasure in cohabiting or having sex with women. That is the second stage. In comparison with this pleasure, he thinks his pleasure of play and sports are trifling. So nothing, games and sport is nothing compared to sexual contact. In the third stage, he takes pleasure in power, name and fame. So he transcends at the level, again, this is all just at this level, nothing going upward. So he's eager to have he takes pleasure in power, name and fame. Only in the fourth stage, he's eager to have a taste of the spiritual pleasure, leaving all the earlier pleasures behind. At that time, the people of the earlier stages will laugh at them as they laugh at the boys in the second stage. Spiritual knowledge in the world are of two kinds, all right? So then he explained the object of knowledge and the object of marifah, and the object of, at the highest level, increase in the knowledge of Allah and increase in the coherence of being a human being. And he says, all right, know, all reader, that the most fortunate of one in the next world be the one who loves God most. So he's talking about how we can reach through the development of our psyche to reach the love of God and to achieve peace, happiness and success in this world and the hereafter. So inshallah, I'll explain to you this detail of where does CBT lies, where does behavioral psychology lies in this continuum. But know that we Muslims has the most holistic, the most wonderful, truthful, revealed knowledge about the nature of our psyche and the nature of psychology. So we must be proud. We must be on the forefront of developing a regeneration of the psyche of human beings towards understanding the nature of development, that we move away from the nafsul haywaniyah, shahwaniyah theory of personality towards a holistic theory, towards holistic perception of Islamic psychology. Inshallah, we'll explain in the next video.